Tomás, you and your colleagues put out a really interesting report earlier this year around the idea of an AI native telco. And obviously want to talk through that today, but I was hoping to start by maybe level setting. I think this idea of AI native telco is important and it's new, but I wanted to look at cloud native telco first, which I think speaks to a lot of technological and organizational slash operational trends that operators are having to navigate. So maybe if you set AI aside, could you give us a bit of an overview of what operators are dealing with kind of here at the midpoint of 5G in terms of the network and then translating their technology and spectrum investments into more effective network monetization?
Sure. The notion of having a cloud native telco, I think, is part and parcel to having an AI native telco. And I think it's worth it to just anchor a little bit on how we came to this notion of AI native, which is to say, if we were to start a telecom company from scratch today, what would be the best way to put it together? And that's where we landed on the best way to put it together is by having AI at the core. And that means having AI assist essentially every decision and an operating model and a culture that embraces AI in order to do so, all the way from marketing and call centers to the network. To achieve that, and I think to your point, you need very deep technical architecture that goes with it. And the best way to do it is by bringing in the cloud. And so you do require cloud for the AI part of it.
So further to that point of cloud native being a requirement for AI native, and your comment about if you were to build a telco from scratch, what a luxury that's not really available to most players in the market. But for me, cloud native speaks to end-to-end ability to deliver services on demand that meet very specific enterprise SLAs, that give the operator an efficiency, that make the consumption of the technology easier on the buy side. And I guess I don't see that as in place at any sort of meaningful scale today. So I guess just help me understand that delta between you need to be cloud native in order to be AI native, but you're not cloud native today. So where does that leave you with regard to AI?
Yeah. And again, the notion of native telcos are not and will never be cloud native or AI native, but this is just the concept of how they need to be thinking about the future. And I think we're talking about three different elements. There's one element, which is the actual network technologies. And all of the network technologies are in the process of modernization. Right? We are moving out of copper and into fiber. We've been in that trend for years. We've transitioned out of 2G to 3G to LTE to 5G, and we already have some discussions about what comes next, not only in terms of standalone 5G, but also in 6G. That's the technology part on the network. The other extreme that I talked about was the AI that you use it across the business to actually make decisions and drive value to customers, but also drive value to the enterprise. And then there's one piece in the middle, which is what you're talking about, which is the OSS and BSS layer. That's what will allow for customers on the network to provision different types of services, to provision them rapidly, to have a mean time to provision of minutes and hours, as opposed to weeks and months. I think that's what you're talking about. And what I would say here is that for that to work, you actually need all three components. So you need the network modernization to be done. You need, in the case of 5G, you need to be in standalone 5G and have a 5G core to even have the functions that would allow you to, from an OSS and BSS perspective, manage it as you describe in your definition of cloud native, but also just ensure that you get value out of the business through the use of AI.
Okay, so let me reflect that back to you, add a little commentary that'll expand the aperture and get your reaction to that. So I think it's fair to say that right now, operators have not really leveraged their investments in 5G to provide differentiation to provide new services that create this big revenue uplift. So they're kind of stuck. They've spent the money, but they're not making the money off of that investment just yet. You called out those three elements. Network modernization, that's in full swing. OSS/BSS evolution, that's ongoing. I think identified problem, well aware of, the investments are taking place. So that would leave maybe this idea of AI ops across the entire organization, which, you know, we get back to this common problem where the people side of things is more challenging than the technological side of things. But the big question there, if operators can effectively layer in AI ops in tandem with these other two transitions that are in progress, can that get them out of this 5G rut? Can they actually start to see some return on investment for the billions they've spent on the network, on the spectrum?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of elements that you're honing in on. And let's start with the first one, which is around the 5G monetization and the path for revenue growth. I think what I would highlight there is that there has actually been a level of monetization in 5G. And you see in particular markets, and the US is a good example, where 5G plans or premium plans do garner more revenue than non-5G plans. Other markets are different. There's other markets where, you know, there's a case to be made that there has been zero value benefit from 5G. Now, I would also just add there that, of course, 5G has a cost benefit in the same way that, you know, 3G, 4G had a cost benefit relative to the prior technology. From a cost per bit basis, 5G is more cost efficient. And so that leaves us with a big question. What is the future monetization? What are all these things that were quote unquote promised? Where are they? And that's where I would say we do not have yet an operator or a country that has moved to 5G SA. And you do need the standalone 5G. You do need the full 5G core to start exploiting some of the key capabilities, starting with slicing and having differentiated network service, not only on the basis of speed, throughput, bandwidth, the traditional thing that people look at, but in terms of having ultra low latency or ultra secure networks, or, you know, managing orchestration across multiple sites in a private network. So there are just elements of the technology that haven't been put into play yet. And until we see those, we can't have the monetization that comes with them.
At the top, I referenced this report, which I'll link to in the show notes, but I wanted to read a section back to you and kind of unpack it, and then excuse the soliloquy I'm about to go into, but rapid expansion of usable data. Operators can collect, structure, and use significantly more data directly than ever before. This information includes data flows from individualized app usage patterns, site-specific customer experience scores, and what can be purchased or shared from partners or third parties. I agree with every bit of that, but I think operators have a track record of underutilizing the data that they have, of not effectively monetizing this highly personal, highly contextualized data that their customers are creating for them and putting into this network. So I guess three-part question. One, do you agree with that around historic underutilization of available data, whether that's customer or network data? Two, does AI disrupt that pattern? Can they fundamentally change things with the addition of artificial intelligence? And then this is more about state of play as it is today, but I feel like to use AI effectively, operators need to get data out of silos. They need to normalize the way that it's reported, and they need to put it into a platform where you can very neatly apply an AI solution. And I just don't know if that is the reality on the ground today. So just help me unpack all of that.
Sure. Let's start with the first one. It is true. Operators in the past have tried to monetize data in different ways. But for starters, there's been a regulatory constraint to what they can and cannot do. Importantly, some of the app companies have actually gotten users permission through the apps to do a lot more with their data, and with, in some cases, much more personal data than the carriers or the telecom companies ever envisioned to do. So they did have some regulatory and risk constraints in monetizing the data directly, for example, for marketing purposes. That said, some of them did end up doing it, and I think most operators already ask customers permission to use the data for marketing purposes, which would be the most sort of traditional approach. I think on your second question, which is what can then be done with having now access to data, having access to more data. And here what I would highlight is that it's not just for the traditional or the historical uses of profiling and marketing, but fundamentally it's about making the product better. One of the issues that we've had in telecom is that it's been very hard to assess the experience of customers, let's say in a mobile network. Customers themselves don't know. They can't tell if service is good or bad because they might be, if you're doing an email in a throughput of 100 megs, you can't tell the difference. If you're doing a call and you have throughput of 1 gig, you also can't tell the difference. So for customers, it's been really hard to assess what they're experiencing. And traditional survey-based metrics like NPS have recency bias, have the inability to capture what that particular customer cares about. Where AI comes in is that now we can use AI to understand everything that's happening on the network and understand relative to individual needs whether the experience is there or not. So for starters, just by having this data, telcos can improve the product. And of course, improving the product is the first step to improving the overall experience for the customer and to start bringing sources of differentiation in a competitive environment. And there's more that we could talk about, but I'll just start with a product example. The third element of your question is, siloed data and data all over the place. For sure, in the telecom space, we've been suffering with a vicious cycle of bad data leading to bad or insufficient AI, leading to less focus on generating data, leading to bad, insufficient AI, and so forth. It has been a vicious cycle, but we are breaking out of it. And there's two elements to break out of it. The first one is the use of digital twins as the foundation for the AI strategies, as opposed to use case specific data sets. We're actually seeing more and more and working with clients on development of broad sets of digital twins. The second thing that I would highlight is actually Gen AI. And it was hard to think that we wouldn't talk about Gen AI, so we will. Gen AI actually helps meet that challenge. If you think of operators' data, circuit inventories have always been a problem for carriers. There's data from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. There's systems of record. There's blueprints, physical blueprints. There's contracts with vendors or contractors that built the network. And more recently, there's tabular data from fiber builds. Gen AI actually allows us to grab all of that, put it together in maybe not a system of record, but in a data product or a digital twin that can then be used to apply AI modeling to circuit data. And so that's one example how we can actually, with digital twins and with Gen AI, bridge that gap.
Yeah, digital twins, that seems to be really what everyone is working towards, is this sort of single point of truth that encapsulates the data flows across the network to include even that user experience, which, as you rightly point out, it's difficult to tell just based off of feeds, whether that is meaningful to the customer, which then ties to your ability to monetize different types of connectivity schemes. But sounds to me like we're talking about this digital twin and then Gen AI as a UX for the digital twin that would allow operators to effectively manage complexity better while maintaining the flexibility they need to put services into market quickly and to capture opportunities when they present themselves. But I guess I do struggle with the time scale. I've been hearing about digital twins of the network, and then an extension of that, the network as a sensor, and creating a nice circular data flow that gives you every bit of information you could possibly want to better manage your network, better manage your business. So, and I'm not asking you to, give me a date or anything, but what sort of milestones would you look for operators to hit as they move towards this future state where they do have the ability to engage directly with a digital twin of their network and manipulate it?
Perfect. So when people think about digital twins, they normally think about wind turbines or jet engines or even factories. And the thing about wind turbines or jet engines is that they're self-contained and start and stop. So when you're managing a digital twin like that, you only need to look at the external factors and the impact that they have on the asset, in this case, that you're looking at. Now, when we started building digital twins in the network, what we had to deal with was the fact that when you start building a twin for one single network element, you looked at everything that affects it. That's a great start. But then that network element has implications on the next network element and the next network element and the next network element. So it's actually a collection of digital twins that you need to build in telecom. This is the network part. But the way we define digital twins can be twins of assets, of people, or of processes. And it is this interconnection of all sorts of digital twins, of assets, of people, or processes that brings the real value. Now, in the milestones or in the markers of operators getting there, we see already with many clients, we've worked with clients and many clients have developed digital twins to have an approach to building AI that is based off of digital twins. It is not a single digital twin, but a collection of digital twins that will get us there. And the milestones are, what is the use of digital twins? How broad is it? Digital twins of what? Is there a digital twin of the RAN, which is something that, for example, we've worked on? Yes. Is there a digital twin of the fiber network? Is there a digital twin of the operations employees or the technicians that are servicing the network? The digital twins of the employees themselves? Are there digital twins of the trade-in process for a mobile device that gets returned? They're all different digital twins that are being worked on, and that in and of itself is providing the milestones.
So I guess if the big problem statement here is how do you use AI to manage complexity and better meet your business objectives, is it fair to say that things are going to get more complex before they get more simple and more, I guess, elegant and easy to use?
I think there's both a big approach to simplification across product sets or even conversations with representatives in either a call center or a store. There's a natural push towards simplification. But actually, AI allows us to use complexity as opposed to just issue it, right? And so we need to use AI to be able to manage this complexity. And there I would split it in two. First, there's analytical AI, which is about making better decisions, faster decisions, and decisions without human interaction. This we can do to improve the experience on the network, change the capital allocation process, manage the field technicians in a different way. And then there's the other part, which is the generative AI, which is what everybody's talking about. I've been working on AI in telco for 6 years, and I've gotten more calls in the past year than in the previous 5 to engage with boards, executives, CEOs, media. And it is driven by this notion of Gen AI. Gen AI plays a different role in this management of complexity.
Well, so speaking of inbound requests from media, I appreciate you taking mine. I sent over a long list of questions that I wanted to talk about, but this report you and your colleagues put out is fairly expansive. It's a very good read. What would you pull out? What would you maybe leave our audience with in terms of key takeaways and then practical advice on how they should be thinking about their businesses and their investments?
I mean, for me, the key takeaway is this notion of AI native. And, if you go back to 97, Nicholas Negroponte wrote Being Digital. And it was prescient in what has happened over the past 25 or so years. I think we're in that moment again today. It is not about companies using AI. It is about companies being AI. This is the concept of AI native. And it requires commitment all the way from the board and the CEO to the executives and people running the day-to-day operation of the company. And so for me, the biggest takeaway is that we need to completely transform ourselves to be AI.
It's very well said, Tomás, and I appreciate you taking the time to share your perspective. Tell us about the work McKinsey's doing here on the Telco AI Deep Dive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. Great seeing you.